I was going to say, just kind of copying from what Mark said, my name is Benjamin Cohen, and I'm called Benjamin. I, like Mark, also have a name where if you look at why people have names, mine was super popular in the early 1980s. And if you think there's loads of like bands who are Benjamins, and it's actually because of a Michael Jackson song, which is about a killer rat from like some weird film. It's also his first #1. So that's why I'm called Benjamin. Well,
do I have to do my bit?
Yeah, go for it.
My parents didn't want a name that you could shorten, but it turns out that everyone loves to call me Ellie or Elle, so turns out that didn't work. Anyway, we're going to go. There's sound on the first slide. Are we okay?
Okay, yes.
Does it work?
No. What's happening? Yes.
Go.
Yay! Give it on. So we're going to talk about a bit about how we reimagined Pink News for Generation Z. For those of you who don't know, I started Pink News 13 years ago as a very much well, we were originally a desktop publication, but for whatever reason, we decided to put it on a mobile here. We obviously, most of our traffic for the last few years has been on mobile. We were very text and image heavy publication, talking to people who are primarily in the LGBT plus community, who define as essentially people who are gay. We do more than just content. We have great events. People like Tony Blair, everyone's favorite prime minister, was at the Pink News Awards a few weeks ago. If you wonder why he seems quite shocked in that photo, it's because he actually got a standing ovation for giving a speech, which I think is the first time he's had that in about 10 years when he came out of the Pink News Awards. So, bye, Tony. Okay, anyway, what is Generation Z? Out of interest, is anyone here from Generation Z? You have to be broadly under 24 to be qualifying.
I'm going to say, oh.
Okay, so there's like 3.
That's more than I was expecting when I had a look at the room earlier.
So, for those of you who don't know, here's how this is the current rules on who is in what gender. Who's not gender? Who's in which generation? So, I used to just be on the cusp after millennials because I'm born in 1982, and it used to be that millennials was from 83, but it's been moved back recently to 77. So if anyone is in that range, you can feel great. Generation Z is generally people who are born after 1996, but sometimes there's all different rules on this, and you can self-define, obviously, as Gen Z if you are 90, probably, now as well. Sorry.
Trigger happy.
Some facts about Gen Z. Gen Z people are responsible for $44 billion of spending in the US, so they are not an insignificant group in terms of economic power, and they will represent 40% of consumers in the US within 14 months' time. Actually, this number I thought would be higher, but 85% supposedly are use social to decide what products they're going to buy and to learn about them. But then, LGBT. Out of interest, who knows what the full definition, other than people who work for PinkNews, what the full definition of LGBTQIAAP2S is, which is the full definition now of LGBT+.
I dare you.
Does anyone know? Okay, so it means... Should I test you, Ella? No.
No.
Okay, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, allies. So if you're not LGBT, you could be in the allies. Pansexual, polyamorous, and two-spirited. That's what LGBT plus means now. What it really means is that, certainly for a younger generation, that it covers all colors of the rainbow. But it's not something that's been it's not really new. Anyone here has heard of Alfred Kinsey? American sexologist? Okay. So Kinsey in the 1940s and 50s did a radical study where he asked people about their sexual experiences and published it in a book, 2 books called The Sexuality of the Human Female and The Sexuality of the Human Male. When it came out, it shocked people because people were really surprised at how many people were gay. And these are the numbers that were found in 1948 in the US. So back then in 1948 in the US, they found that 10% of men said that they were exclusively gay, exclusively homosexual. It's a really surprisingly high number when you remember that 70 years ago, it was illegal to be gay in every US state. It was, of course, illegal to be gay in the UK as well. For women, the number was smaller. So only 2 to 6%, depending on how the questions were asked. But there was a much larger number, even back then, in 1948, and another study done in 1953, which showed that there was a very large number of people that said that they had had some form of same-sex experience or same-sex attraction. And that's been quite important for what we've been doing. This study by YouGov was probably our biggest decision for why we wanted to go on to Snapchat. So it happened in 2015, and they asked people, and this is the scale, the Kinsey scale. So it goes from 0 being 100% straight to 6 being 100% gay. And what you find is that 49% of people in the UK said that their sexuality was not 100% straight, who were under 24, back in 2015. The numbers actually, yeah, we'll see what the numbers are now. This is some of the PinkNews Snapchat team. What you'll find is that people's sexual orientation isn't necessarily aligned by binary labels, 1, 6, etc., or 0 and 6. But now you get the opportunity to say what your sexuality is. Now, I'm not going to do like a complicated thing with everyone lining up, so we're going to do hands. So if you raise your right hand, you're 100% straight. If you raise your left hand, you are somewhere on the spectrum, so between 1 and 6. I'm just interested. So right hand if you're 100% straight, left hand if you're somewhere on the spectrum.
That's where we're testing your left and right. Oh,
Yeah,
I have to put my hand up. Wait, what is it again?
So you're 1 to
Left.
6. Okay.
That's a lot of left hands.
Yeah, so last time we did it, we actually gave people pink and black, white cards to hold up, and that was easier to try and calculate than try and, okay. Other things about Gen Z, it's not just about sexuality. The majority of people who are Gen Z know someone who uses gender-neutral pronouns. So at PinkNews, we actually have it as a mandatory policy now on Slack and also on email signatures. You have to define your preferred pronouns. So I am he, him. I also like they, them, because I don't always feel it's necessary to refer to gender. Ellen, you're she, her.
She, her. Yeah. Them is good as well.
Yeah. Also, the majority of Gen Zs don't necessarily buy clothes that are strictly defined as their gender. So they might go onto different floors in Primark or, well, I was going to say Top Man, but they might go into Topshop.
Good Hood.
Huh?
Good Hood. They have cash to spend.
Yeah, yeah. Also, the majority of them support gender-neutral toilets. I actually noticed that there isn't a defined gender-neutral toilet here. But at PinkNews and also at Snapchat, it's kind of weird. We're going to be talking about Snapchat at Twitter. There are gender-neutral toilets there. And the majority of people who are in this generation would support the widespread use of gender-neutral toilets. What we think that means is that there is a much larger number of people who are on the LGBT spectrum and therefore relevant to PinkNews, which has a history as being an LGBT plus publisher, than previously imagined. There's lots of theories about why this could be. So some people think it's because people eat more junk food now. So there was actually a very strange study done which said that eating too much junk food turns you a bit gay. We sometimes use gone on chicken nuggets. I'm vegetarian. I am married to a man. My husband's over there. But that did.
Ben is definitely gay.
Yeah, but
I can confirm.
But it wasn't from chicken nuggets. But actually, that was a story containing that was actually one of our most popular things we've ever posted on Snapchat, and we'll get to some of the stats on that in a minute. The reality is, chicken nuggets aside, probably people are more willing to talk about who they are and who they love and how they identify. And that's a lot to do with the growth in social media over the past few years. People are coming out on YouTube, people are coming out on Snapchat, people are coming out on Twitter in a way that people just weren't really able to in the past. So if I remember when I first told my mom that I liked guys, I was 15. I just got the courage to buy Gay Times at Brent Cross Shopping Centre, WH Smith, which is like a big moment. People don't need to do that anymore. They can go onto Snapchat and look at PinkNews now. just some other facts, just so we know. Even if people aren't in the LGBT spectrum, this was some polling we commissioned from YouGov of people who are straight, who are under 24. The majority of them support same-sex couples having kids. They support LGBT inclusive education. The majority support same-sex marriage in places like Northern Ireland, the only part of the UK where it's still illegal for gay couples to get married. Essentially, which all informed us that this was a really interesting audience for us to talk to.
Now it's my turn. My turn to speak. Yeah, I let the man go first. Joke, a joke. Look at your face. So essentially, after we decided who we wanted to reach, we couldn't just sit back and wait for them to come to us on desktop or kind of traditional platforms like Facebook and, sorry to say it, Twitter, but Twitter. Unfortunately for me, I guess, my advent at PinkNews kind of coincided with, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Facebook algorithm change, which meant that essentially, I mean, my background is in audience development and social, and there are some of my former colleagues in the room, which is not nerve-wracking at all. I think that for the past kind of 5 years or so, publishers had been kind of almost exclusively relying on Facebook for either social engagements or social referrals, and once Facebook completely changed the algorithm, something had to give, essentially. It was kind of a bit of a blessing in disguise for us at PinkNews, actually, because we were able to shift our focus completely off platform and gear our content towards a mobile-first experience. In order to kind of speak to Generation Z, or Gen Z, as I think we're meant to call them, we had to kind of go to...
Maybe they're called the founders.
The founders?
Yeah, that's one of the names.
Not into that. But we kind of had to...
a new generation.
Okay, fine. I think I'm a bit better because I'm not Gen Z, unfortunately. But we had to reconnect to these people in a kind of like, I guess, a relatable and meaningful way. So we had to go to where they are. So this got us to thinking of the kind of like mobile spaces that these people already occupy. So that's thinking about places like Tinder, Instagram, YouTube, and Snapchat. So that kind of like led us to rethink what we were doing with our content and where you're consuming it. So wherever and however you access PinkNews, you're going to get like a completely different experience. And to me, that has been the most profound on Snapchat. So at the end of July, it's all kind of like blurred into one sleepless. So at the end of July, PinkNews became the first LGBT+ publisher to launch on Snapchat Discover. And while I must admit that, like I just said, there were many, many sleepless nights, and I had to basically hire a team from... Actually, I think I just said to you one day, I was like, how do you do a Snapchat? Because it was just me, and we had to hire completely from the ground up. But I have to say that reimagining our content for an entirely new audience and kind of re-envisaging the brand is one of the things I'm most proud of in my career to date.
For a full screen experience, which we weren't doing.
Yeah. The great thing about Snapchat is that we have been quite literally forced, like we had no choice in the matter, to totally rethink the way we approach our journalism. I mean, we already know how to write a headline, how to front load SEO, how to kind of rank for keywords that you want, like gay sex. Lesbian sex. Oh crap. We rank for lesbian sex. Try not to take that one away from us. You already know kind of like what the best image to use and whether it's relevant to use a video or not. But Snapchat was a whole new experience. I mean, I remember in the kind of like early editions we were plotting, I was watching them back on my phone and I was like, this isn't moving enough, even though it's fucking moving loads. It's like sensory overload, and we had to relearn an entirely new kind of process. But it's been great. We've turned long-form reporting into animation. We've recut horizontal video that was made for YouTube to vertical full-screen experience, as Ben said. We've invested completely in a new team and transformed the way that we operate as a kind of like newsroom collective. Another kind of interesting point that I wanted to touch upon is that we've kind of had to relearn how to talk to an audience, which is something I think is quite rare in journalism. Starting from zero subscribers. And I found myself asking, as young and youthful as I look, I am unfortunately over 24. So I've had to ask younger members of our team whether people still use certain phrases like crud, for example.
What does crud mean?
It's like crap, but like more American.
Right.
I think it means shit.
Okay.
But apparently people don't use crud anymore, FYI. And we've kind of meant that we've also been able to expand our coverage. So PinkNews as a desktop experience is very kind of news focused. We're very political. We're very kind of like engaged in that way. But now, you know, we can write about beauty. We can write about sexual health. We can kind of like explore dating and gaming and, you know, animals, which is everyone's favorite on Snapchat. And kind of like all that new learned experience has enabled us to kind of jump into something else that's completely new. And I'm really pleased to say that this week we launched our first show on Snapchat, which there is sound. Hopefully I will play you a little 10-second snippet of now.
My name is Lee. My advice is brutal and honest, but it comes from the heart. My name is Carnage, and don't blame me if the advice goes wrong.
If you don't know how to use Snapchat, just search for Ask the Aunties, please, on your app and subscribe.
Subscribe to PinkNews.
Oh, and subscribe to PinkNews too.
You can search for PinkNews and you find both, actually.
Yeah.
And then subscribe to both.
But has it all been worth it, Ben?
Yes, it definitely has. So just if you look at this stat, this is the audience on Snapchat, the PinkNews Snapchat that we're reaching at the moment. So essentially, the whole of our experience before was this group, the 25 plus. We weren't really reaching people who were aged 13 to 24. Certainly on things like Facebook, we may have been reaching some of these people, but it started to dwindle, if I'm very honest. So we've massively expanded the total potential audience for PinkNews recently. And, drum roll, some proper numbers.
Oh yeah, this is the juicy stuff. So in just 3 months on Snapchat, we achieved a total audience of 35 million, an average of between 1 and 2 million users per edition.
Can I just butt in that we're not sure whether the average needs to change because our average editions are doing more than that now. So maybe the new average is higher. We're not really sure.
Maybe
yet.
2, I could probably say anecdotally.
Yeah.
A record of 78 million views for a single edition and a record of 9 million users for that same edition.
On one day.
Yeah, it was kind of nuts. And on top of that, our subscriber base is growing. So at the end of October, we reached 500,000 subscribers on our channel. What I think that I'd like to mention here is, which is really great about Snapchat, especially for us, is that your subscriptions are private, essentially. So what that means is that your homophobic uncle can't see that you're subscribing to an LGBT plus platform, whereas he can see, you know, what you like on Facebook,
Or Twitter.
who you follow on Twitter, what you're doing on Instagram. So it kind of, you know, it gives questioning people a sort of safety, which we haven't experienced on other platforms.
Or if you're straight, if you're actually in that group of people that's in the 100% straight, you might just like our content. You may be an ally and you don't want to label yourself. So think of Snapchat, if you're not a Snapchat user and subscribing, a bit like the shows that you're following on Netflix or the things that you don't necessarily want everyone to know that you like listening to on Spotify. It's a private experience.
Yeah, I just want to point out here, if you don't mind, Ben, that so we achieved the same number of, I guess, follows on Snapchat in 2 months as we did on Facebook in 10 years. So that kind of just goes to show the power of the platform, and also, I guess, the power of Generation Z.
And being able to do it privately. It's not a big action. I genuinely think if you're a 13-year-old trans, non-binary lesbian in Texas, liking PinkNews on Facebook, or in a country where you're discriminated against because being LGBT is illegal, you're not going to like us. You could end up actually in prison or being executed, whereas on Snap, no one knows.
I was trying to bring this neatly back to the Kinsey scale, but I don't know if we've managed that. Yeah. But recently, we did our own kind of like amateur polling, I guess, in a Snapchat edition via a swipe up poll. We asked our users to basically tell us their sexual identity, and this is what we saw.
So I think what's really interesting here is that the majority of people actually said that they were 100% straight. Now, this is really interesting because this was a poll that nearly a quarter of a million people participated in the poll and took part in it, in an edition which was about LGBT issues. I think it was primarily about drag queens and trans issues. And all these straight people were reading that edition and then wanted to participate and share what their sexual orientation is. While the numbers are slightly higher here for the people who are 6 than the YouGov study found in 2015, we broadly match the array of people who are on the spectrum. And that, in our view, reflects the reality that young people feel that they don't necessarily like labels, and they just like who they like.
I was going to try and end on like a poignant thing. So so my history before I worked at PinkNews is I worked in audience development for the Evening Standard. I've also worked at the indie and like the mainstream press. And the thing that I found the most, I guess, it's like the most rewarding, but it's the most challenging thing, is that being a minority publisher, there's so many things that kind of come up against you that you don't realize. Like, for example, being like downgraded on YouTube for having like the word gay in headlines and things like that. It's
or
kind of
Facebook Instant Article not liking us writing about homophobia and thinking we are homophobic.
Yeah, it's muddy. But what has been really amazing about launching on a platform like Snapchat, and what kind of gives me hope for the future, is that it's been kind of just like a really great opportunity to explore a new audience, and has really opened my eyes to the fact that there are people who can come and consume LGBT plus content in kind of like without fear, but also with like a completely open mind. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
So we've got questions, have we? Where's the slide?
Oh, I didn't put a slide in.
Fine. So does anyone have any questions? Now's the time to ask a question about Snapchat, PinkNews, whatever. Person over there.
Hi. So my question is, you were saying how you had to kind of change, or you started covering different stories on Snapchat to appeal to this new demographic, and I'm wondering, have you taken any of those lessons and changed your desktop experience at all, or those kind of stories that you cover?
Yes, to a certain extent. I think if I go back to slightly the point I was making before about if you kind of come to wherever you enter PinkNews, be that Twitter or Facebook or direct referral to the homepage or on Instagram, you get a slightly different experience because it's sort of hello. Oh, there we go. Just cut me off. It's sort of kind of like tailored to the, I guess, what am I looking to say here? Tailored to the kind of like subtext of where you are. But we definitely have sort of kind of like tried to diversify what we're doing on the site. So you'll see more kind of like fun, I guess, as opposed to just like lots of heavy political stuff, which we have kind of been known for in the past. Some of the kind of like, I don't want to say this word, but I'm going to say it, sorry, listicle type things that we've done on Snap has then been translated to kind of
vice versa. We've had
yeah.
stories like, I think yesterday's piece, yesterday's Snapchat edition originated from a...
Oh yeah, so a lot of the content that you'll see on Snapchat came from the website first. It's just been reimagined. Either like it's been shot for video, or we've animated it, or we've just turned it into like a swipe up article to read. But everything has a second life. So everything that we put on Snapchat will live on elsewhere, either on Instagram or on the site itself. So yes, I guess.
Our first show, Ask the Aunties, came from Instagram. We made it for Instagram and YouTube, and then it's been reimagined for Snapchat with obviously a much larger audience that we're reaching, and different kind of subscriber patterns. But they're all working together. But one important thing is that we're trying to communicate to people now from 13 to like 80, 90. So we recognize that the type of content we're producing on different platforms needs to be tailored to the type of audience you are. If you are someone who deliberately goes on an LGBT website, you kind of know a bit more about the history of the LGBT rights movement, whereas on Snapchat, we're kind of assuming you know nothing. So there's also like an education piece, and we don't assume previous knowledge. So we have to kind of talk to the audience based on who they are. which we've learned really quite quickly. Any other questions? Yeah. Person over there.
Get a mic to that man.
I'm curious about your experiences in Snapchat, because people were saying that people don't use Snapchat anymore and they use Instagram stories. Yeah, this is the last 3 months?
Yeah, it's the last 3 months, but this is one day. I mean, there's no comparison. For us, Instagram to Snapchat, Snapchat is the platform that works. But it's different because on Instagram, you're competing against thousands upon thousands of publishers, whereas Snap takes a curated approach. We're the only LGBT publisher, so we aren't competing against others necessarily.
I know that lots of people kind of think that Snapchat is dying, and I know that the user base has got slightly smaller over the last year, especially
Active daily users.
Yeah, especially since the
This
UX.
is being filmed.
Oh yeah, sorry Snapchat. So yeah, active daily users has decreased slightly, but I think it's far, talking as kind of like an audience development person, I think that it's kind of far from over. I do think that Instagram is definitely on the up as well, and it's something we're really interested to tap into, especially like if you're kind of like a brand that does e-commerce, like that shit's great for you. But like Ben said, you can't really argue with the numbers and the fact that Snapchat kind of is like a stage and it allows you to kind of perform. And it's been really great for us because it showed us that people are interested in our content, and it's just much easier for them to access now. The other great thing about Snap is that it's kind of like user first. Like when you open the app, it opens to your own face, like the camera is. I mean, that's terrifying, especially if you're down here. But you know, it's kind of like an experience that's geared towards the user. Whereas, you know, also another thing, actually, sorry, I'm blabbing now. It's not as depressing as some other platforms. You don't go on Snapchat and then feel like, shit, I need to lose some weight, or oh my god, I've got
People are being their
7,000
authentic
chins.
self, certainly in the communications that they're sending to their friends. Because there was a really good sort of example that Snap sometimes use, which is showing two different the same person's photographs on two different platforms. On Instagram, it's like a pose model thing, whereas on Snapchat, it might be just a selfie that you've taken of yourself saying, let's go and get pizza.
Snapchat allows you to be a bit of a goofball.
Yeah.
Which
And you're talking to your
good.
closest friends as well. And we're part of what we really like is being part of that conversation with your closest friends. Because on Snap, you might have 20 close friends, whereas on Instagram or Facebook, you have hundreds or thousands of people. I think the other like really important thing is if we think about it, it has really worked for us. That's not to say that Snap is right for everyone. And when we talk to other publishers, not everyone is seeing the numbers that we're doing. We are performing way ahead of market in the UK.
There was a gap in the market.
Yeah, for us.
Lucky for us.
But also, look, we're unusual because we're a UK HQ'd business, which is publishing content which is primarily consumed in the US. We have a very strong UK audience on Snap. If I was just producing, I don't know, a product for Snapchat in Germany, I wouldn't necessarily be getting these numbers because there's a limited number of people who speak German. Also, I'd need to build the same team that we needed to build for an English language edition. So there's opportunities but challenges for other people on that. What we're going to next is we are frankly launching in other languages and building on top of it. It's easier if you're doing that from English than if you were starting in another geo first or language first.
Any other questions?
I'm afraid
Oh
I
no.
forgot to intervene.
Can we do one more? Please, I like the microphone.
I get that.